Okay, today we're going to learn how to use the midpoint and the distance formula. All right, so some key vocabulary for this lesson. The midpoint of a segment is going to be the point that divides the segment into two congruent parts. So when you have a midpoint, it's the middle of the segment, and it's going to make two equal segments. When we talk about bisecting that segment, we can either bisect this segment with a point, a line segment, a plane that's going to intersect that segment in the middle, at the midpoint. I'm going to draw you some examples. So if I need a segment, because I can't find the midpoint of a line because a line never ends. So I can only find the midpoint of a segment. And if you have a picture of a segment drawn, it can either be labeled, and I could say that A, B, C are points on that segment. And if you have little congruency marks or little tick marks indicating that the two pieces are equal, you will know that point B is the midpoint. You can also tell that point B would be a midpoint if they had the lengths measured. So let's say again I have points A, B, and C. But let's say I told you how long segment AB was and how long segment BC was. This would indicate that when I have two equal pieces, that point B is the midpoint. So I could say point B is the midpoint of AC. And I would draw a picture of a segment on top. I cannot find the midpoint of a line because a line never ends. I can also bisect my line segment at a point, a line with a ray, or a line segment. So if I have my line segment, I've already drawn the midpoint with a point. I could also bisect it or cut it in half with a line. I would have my two congruency marks here. I could also bisect it with a segment. If I turn those arrows into points, I could also bisect it with a ray or a plane. Any questions on what a midpoint is? All right, let's move on. We have a picture of a skateboard. Now, usually the description or the sentence that goes along with your picture is going to be important to you. And if they already don't have it marked with congruency marks, then I recommend you label it. Now, probably on your slide you can see it a little bit better, but on my picture there's some little red congruency marks labeled here that this piece is congruent to this piece, and they're telling us that VW bisects, let me highlight, VW bisects XY, and that's why the red congruency marks are there. Now, it's telling me the length of this piece here, XT, is 39.9. Right here. It wants me to find the length of XY. Okay, how much, XY is the whole thing. How much is TY? 39.9. We know that because point T bisected it. How can I find the length of xy? I can either add 39.9 plus 39.9, or I could also multiply it by 2. So when I add that, 9 plus 9, 9 plus 9 plus 1, and 3 plus 3 plus 1. Okay. So the length of the entire skateboard design would be 79.8 centimeters. Good so far? Any questions? All right, slide. All right, now we have a description here and we have a picture. And it's telling us that point M right here is the midpoint of segment VW. It wants us to find the length of the entire segment, VM. Or I'm sorry, only half of it, VM. How can I find the length of that piece of the segment? What am I going to do?
4x minus 1 equals 3x plus 3.
Beautiful. Okay, because we know that point M is the midpoint, I can set up an algebraic equation setting the two segments equal to each other. So I'm going to do 4x minus 1 and 3x plus 3. All right, I now have to solve for x. How can I solve for x? What do I need to do? Okay, I'm going to move the 3x over. I get x minus 1 equals 3. Now what do I do? Okay, so I'll add 1. And I end up getting x equals 4. Am I finished? Did they ask me to find the value of x? No, right? I need to keep going. How can I find the length of VM? Plug it in. All right, so here's VM. It's the 4x minus 1. So 4x minus 1. I replace 4, the x with 4, multiply it, and subtract. 16 minus 1 equals 15. So this part of the segment is 15. Can anybody tell me what the other side's going to equal? 15. Because it was bisected, or the midpoint was M, so both sides are equal. One way you could check your answer to make sure that you did the math right is you could also plug in 4 into the 3x plus 3. Good. Any questions on calculating the length of a segment when you know it's a midpoint? All right. All right, now I know on your slide you don't have the midpoint formula, so go ahead and write it in. Okay, the midpoint of a segment that joins 2 points is going to be calculated by basically finding an average. You're going to add the x's, divide by 2, add the y's, divide by 2. Now, I don't know if you remember back from when you learned the slope equation. These little numbers down here are subscripts. They're not exponents. They're like little labels. So think of this as order pair number 1 and this as order pair number 2. So for the formula, you will add the x's, x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And then for the y, part of the order pair is y1 plus y2 divided by 2. After we do the adding and the dividing, this is going to give us an ordered pair, which would become the midpoint. Now, I'm going to give it another little subscript, just like the top had, and I'm going to call this like XM. I'm going to give it so I know it's the midpoint. So X with a little m and Y with a little m. So after I do these calculations, it's going to give me my order pair. And we're going to practice it. Everybody ready to move on? Anybody still need the slide? Okay. Anybody still need it? All right, let's go on. Let's practice using this to this formula. Okay, so we have two problems that they're asking us to practice with. The first one are just two order pairs. I'm going to say that my first order pair, the 0, 4, this one is going to be my x1 and my y1. And this will be x2 and y2. I'm now going to plug it into the formula that you wrote on the previous slide. So I'm first going to add the two x's. So it's going to be the 0 and the 6, because remember, in an order pair, the first number is x, the second number is y. So I'm going to add 0 plus 6 and then divide by 2. 0 plus 6 is 6, divide by 2 is 3. So far I've gotten the x of my midpoint. Now I have to do the same thing with the y of the order pair. So y1 plus y2. So I'm now going to do 4 plus -2 divide by 2. 4 plus -2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the midpoint of these two order pairs is 3, 1. So it's a matter of just taking the two order pairs and plugging them in. Everybody good when it's just numbers? Let's try it with when it's letters. Now don't get all, worried that because I don't have all numbers, I've actually got a letter. It's okay. We can have a B in our answer. All right, so again, I'm going to take the two x coordinates. So I'm going to take the b plus 2 and the 3b, add them, and divide by 2. So b plus 2 plus 3b, divide by 2. When I group my b's, I end up with a 4b plus 2, divide by 2. Now, because I can divide both of those numbers by 2, I'm going to simplify this. So I'm going to divide 4b by 2, and I get 2b, and 2 by 2, and get 1. So far I've gotten my x of my midpoint. Now I have to do the y's. My y's are going to be 0 and 6. So now I'm going to add 0 plus 6, divide by 2. 0 plus 6 is 6, divide by 2, and I get 3. So the order pair for my midpoint is 2b plus 1, 3. I know that one was a little challenging because it had a b in there and not just numbers. But again, you're just grouping like terms. Any questions on that one? All right, let's move on to the next slide. Anybody still need this slide? Next slide. All right, now we're going to still use the same formula The only difference is we're going to sort of work backwards. All right, they're giving us a picture here. Now, technically, if they give you a picture, could we find the coordinates of K without even using the formula? We could just look at our coordinate plane, correct? So we could see that K is located at the ordered pair 3, -2. However, we're going to do the calculations because you may not be given a picture. You may end up only being given an endpoint and the midpoint. So here we go. We're going to use the formula. So I'm going to write it up here. I'm going to rewrite it. So remember, your formula is x1 plus x2 divide by 2, and then y1 plus y2 divide by 2. Now remember, once we do these calculations, it's going to give us an x coordinate of the midpoint and a y coordinate for the midpoint. So I could sort of set this up as this equals this. And that's how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to take it one letter at a time. So first of all, let's take care of the x's. Let's find the x value for K. So I'm going to set it up as x1 plus x2 divide by 2 is equal to xm. In my problem, I'm going to say that this midpoint, this is xm, this is ym. Endpoint, this is going to be x1, and this is going to be y1. I'm looking for the x2, y2. So let's replace what we know. I know that x1 in my problem is going to be 1. I don't know x2. I'm leaving that as my variable. Divide by 2 is part of the formula. And the midpoint that they gave me was 2, the x of the midpoint. I need to solve this for x2. What do I get rid of first? I'm going to get rid of that denominator first, correct? I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. And now I'm left with 1 plus x with a little subscript equals 4. And now I'll divide. Subtract. And x2 is equal to 3. Now I have to repeat the same process for the y. So again, I'm going to go back up. My y1 is 4. I don't know y2. It's divided by 2. And the y of the midpoint they gave me is 1. Again, I need to isolate the y2. So right here. So first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the denominator. And I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So multiply both sides by 2 to get it to cancel. And then I get 4 plus y with a little subscript of 2 equals 2. And then I minus 4 from both sides. And then y2 is equal to -2. So the ordered pair is 3, -2, which is the other endpoint, which we saw right away by looking at the picture. So if you're not given a picture, this is the process you will follow. Any questions? So as you can see, we're pulling in quite a bit of our algebra skills into this geometry course right away. Anybody still need this slide? No? All right, let's move on. 2 more slides. All right, the next formula we're going to cover is the distance formula. And again, we're using our order pairs. You're going to be given 2 order pairs. Again, you could say this is order pair number 1. It's got the little 1 subscripts. And this is order pair number 2. So the formula is x2 minus x1 squared, y2 minus y1 squared. Take the 2 quantities, add them, and then square root the final answer. Your answers need to be in simplest radical form. Okay, we're not going to use a calculator and give your answer as a decimal. So let's go ahead and we can try an example of this. Everybody get the formula down? Anybody still need it? All right, let's try to use this. All right, we do have a formula. So again, I'm going to rewrite it again. So up at the top, I could do x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, and it's all under a square root. So I'm going to say that this is order pair number 1, so x1, y1. This is order pair number 2, x2, y2. I am now going to replace all of these x's and y's into the formula. So I'm going to write 4 minus 6 squared plus negative 5 minus negative 3, which is really plus 3, squared, all under the radical. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do each of the parentheses. So I get negative 2 squared, negative 2 squared, still under the radical. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. Under the radical. 4 plus 4 is 8. Now, if on the test you stop here and leave your answer unsimplified, the whole thing isn't wrong, but you will not get full credit for this. We need to break the 8 down. So sort of think of a factor tree. You could either break it all the way down to prime numbers. So for example, if you have your 8, I could break it into 4 times 2. If right away you realize that 4 is a perfect square, it can come out as a 2, radical 2. If not, you can keep breaking this down, and then whenever you make pairs of a number, that's the perfect square, and it'll come out. So simplest radical form for the square root of 8 would be 2 radical 2. Any questions on the distance formula?